For every story that we tell in Deviant, we put in hundreds of hours of research, go through thousands of documents, go through hours of tapes, go through hours of videos. It's a lot. And obviously, we can't fit it all in the show. But if you want to see some of the raw material that we're working with, see it for yourself, read those documents, see some of those pictures, watch some of those videos, there's two ways that you can do that. One, follow us on social. We're on TikTok and we're on Instagram at deviant.podcast. And for even deeper access, visit our Patreon. Deviantpodcast.com is where you'll find it. And there you can find a lot of that stuff. Also, you can join our Discord and have exclusive conversations with me and Andrew. Ask us your questions. Give us your ideas. Come chat with us. We'd love to meet you. Again, that's at our Patreon at deviantpodcast.com. The price starts at free. This show contains material which may not be suitable for all audiences, and in this particular episode, there is some salty language ahead.
I mean, you're trying to tell me to describe something.
No. We kind of got off of these girls a little bit. We kind of went on some other things and everything, so, that's cool. Just to give you a little time to free your mind up and everything. Let's go back to the 6 some more and see what's come through your mind. Anything else that we should know that you're willing to give us?
Police interrogations can be tricky. There's a number of different ways detectives can go at a suspect. Establish a rhythm, build a rapport, compromise. You can get confrontational too. Pin the suspect down with his own words.
But what you see on television, that good cop, bad cop routine, that's usually not often one of those ways. A suspect's psychology, their willingness to play ball, figuring out all those variables are how detectives figure out a strategy.
And frankly, sometimes interrogations are just kind of boring.
I'm really trying to concentrate. I can't remember it all. Okay. And I will, it'll come.
When do you think it's going to come?
I don't know, it'll come, because it'll come.
On Halloween night in 2009, detectives Mel Smith and Lemmy Griffin of the Cleveland Police Homicide Unit have been in the interrogation room with Anthony Sowell for hours. When they first start their interview, the sun is up, beaming brightly through the window next to where Anthony Sowell is sitting.
Like Andrew just said, hours go by. And Anthony Sowell's claims of, I don't remember that, or I only have vague recollections about the dead women inside my house, that's starting to wear thin with detectives. And inside the interrogation room, the temperature starts to rise. The sun has set, and any shred of patience from Detectives Smith and Griffin is gone.
Why do you think we want to know more?
Well, you telling me that you want to bring some closure to him. You want to find out who these
people are. What do you think we want to know more for?
I don't know, but I'm trying to help you. But if I tell you I can't help you, I can't.
Why can't you help us? You're the only one who can.
Because I can't remember. I can't remember.
You're the only one who can.
I can't remember. I cannot remember.
You know you killed him, but you can't remember how you killed him.
I don't know.
You punished somebody's daughters. Now you're not willing because your ass trying to save your ass that you don't even want to do the right thing.
Technically, Sowell is talking, but he's not really saying anything.
Finally, Detective Mel Smith had enough. He lets it rip.
The only right thing you can motherfucking do, you don't want to do it. You ain't doing shit. The only goddamn right thing you can do. The only fucking right thing you can do, and you don't want to do shit. That's bad, man. That's fucked up. You tell me you a man?
I'm done. I don't know.
You should have told me that long goddamn time ago instead of running me up and down the motherfucking street. Say, man, I don't want to tell you shit. Fuck them bitches. And I would have accepted that. But that's bullshit,
that's not the way
man.
I felt.
Them girls are somebody's daughters.
That's not the way I felt.
Well, feel the way you feel and tell me what I need to know. Oh, man. That hurts, man.
Getting a confession and getting answers for the families who had been asking for months about their missing daughters, sisters, and mothers is going to be difficult.
If you're angry about many of the things you've heard in this story already, you should be, because Anthony Sowell could have been in this same room earlier, a lot earlier. And when you look at what's missed, what could have been, the lives that weren't saved, yeah, anger will do nicely.
We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good. Some of us are wired for bad. but a select few step outside all of society's boundaries. From Cold Open Media, this is Deviant, Anthony Sowell, Part 3.
Welcome back to Deviant, where we chase the truth into the dark corners of what humans are capable of. I'm Dan Semitovich, along with my co-host, Andrew Iden.
We've told you before that this story is one that has points along the way that are absolutely maddening. There's Don Laster, who told you about the woman who flew out of a third-story window at Anthony Sowell's house.
In that case, there's clear evidence of a sexual assault. Anthony Sowell, he's a felon on parole. There's a fight with Anthony as he tries to drag the woman back into his house, and despite all that, he's never arrested for that. Remember, before all that happens, there's also the assault on Latundra Billups.
That case takes more than a month to be fully investigated, and when it finally is, it opens the door to Anthony Sowell's house and ultimately the entire case. But in a story littered with missed signs and red flags, the one we're about to tell you is the most glaring example yet of a missed opportunity and egregious indifference.
There was an incident with a woman named Gladis Wade who had been attacked, had been beaten and injured in an encounter with Anthony Sowell.
Meet Terry Gilbert. He's a Cleveland attorney, and this is the story of Gladis Wade.
I've done a lot of police misconduct cases over the years, mostly from the standpoint of people who are beaten or victims of excessive force and that kind of thing. So I knew a lot about the Cleveland Police Department and its history. And it just did not add up in terms of how he could have been released for basically an attempted rape, robbery, and assault of Gladis Wade back on December 8th, 2008, and how he could be released and then kill at least 6 or 7 more victims until eventually it was discovered at his home that there were a number of bodies buried and hidden on his property.
Here's Chris Schroeder again, former prosecutor in the Cuyahoga County District Attorney's Office.
In December 2008, Gladis Wade is walking down the street on Imperial Avenue. Anthony Sowell calls out to her. He wishes her a Merry Christmas and asks her if she wants to come to his house and drink with him. He's a stranger, so she says no. As she continues walking down the street, he grabs her from behind, puts her in a military-style chokehold. She passes out, and he drags her into his house. She wakes up on the 3rd floor in that front room where the bodies of Talacia Fortson and Diane Turner would later be found. And he comes in the room, and she fights back. She gouges his eyes, gouges his face, grabs his testicles. She's able to get past him and go down that very narrow hallway, down the narrow flight of stairs. He chases her down the stairs. He attacks her. There's a struggle. The glass in the front door is broken. He chases her out into the yard. The struggle continues there. She's able to get away and run across the street into that chicken restaurant. And there are people in the restaurant, and she tells them what happened. And he follows her into the restaurant, and he says that she's a prostitute and she stole his watch. And the people in the restaurant believe him, and they don't call the police. So she leaves the restaurant, and she flags down a passing police car.
When Gladys flags down that police car, Anthony Sowell has already served 15 years in prison for rape. We'll get into more details about that in the next episode, but the important thing here is that he's already a registered sex offender. Sowell is on parole. He's in the system.
She waved the car to a stop, and she told him what happened. They went to the scene. There were 2 police officers. They went into his house. They saw the blood. They took photographs. And they arrested. And she was injured, by the way. She had a serious injury on her thumb, and she also had scratches on her face. So for those 2 police officers, it was a no-brainer for them to arrest them.
2 Cleveland police officers respond to Sowell's house, where, according to the incident report, they see blood in the driveway and on the wall inside the home. On the 3rd floor of Sowell's house, they find a sweater, sweatpants, and soiled underwear.
They took him into custody, brought him to the local jail in Cleveland, and that's what kicks off an investigation to determine whether or not he should be charged or released pending further investigation where the case would go to a grand jury.
The attempted rape, kidnapping, and robbery of Gladis Wade is assigned to the Cleveland Police Department's Sex Crimes Unit, where it lands on the desk of Detective Georgia Hussein.
And then she goes and talks to Gladis. Gladis gives a statement. She goes to Sowell, and Sowell was a pretty savvy guy in terms of his ability to charm and manipulate victims. I think this is a common characteristic of a serial killer. And so Detective Hussein fell for what she thought was a defense for Mr. Sowell. He claimed, I didn't do anything. She was injured by her own doing, and she was fighting me. And so then Hussein goes to the city prosecutor in charge of looking into cases within 72 hours. And Hussein told, her name is Lorraine Coyne. According to Lorraine Coyne, Hussein told her that Gladis Wade is not credible, and she believed Anthony Sowell. Based on that, they released him with nothing more than an opinion by the detective that maybe she's not telling the truth. But there were injuries, there was blood on the scene. You have a woman crying out for help on the street. Police arrest him, and then they release him. It's over.
He's released back into the community in the hope that maybe some more evidence will develop later on, which of course it did, but by then it was much too late.
Before she even got into the investigation, she failed to look at the facts that were relevant to her investigation. She did not look at the police report that the two officers made outlining what they had discovered. She did not look at the photographs.
According to court documents, on December 10th, during that meeting with Assistant City Prosecutor Lorraine Coyne, Detective Hussein doesn't include that Anthony Sowell is a convicted sex offender, claiming it's not relevant.
There are a few other what the hell moments in those court documents. Detective Hussein never visits the crime scene while Sowell's in custody, and she never even reviews the incident report from the responding officers. And also, she questions the credibility of Gladis Wade. She doesn't necessarily believe that she's actually a victim.
Hussein said that there were inconsistencies, but there weren't. I mean, there might be little minor inconsistencies, but the point is it's not up to the detective to decide who's telling the truth. That's for the prosecution later on. But that's not the end of it. After the decision was made to release, the next day she contacts him, goes over to the home, and asks if she can come in and see him and look around. She never got a search warrant to go to the house while he was in custody to examine the crime scene. And if there was a search warrant, maybe they would have found the bodies of the other women that were in his house. Some were in his house and some were buried in the backyard. So that caught everybody by surprise. And that didn't come up until I deposed her. And the only thing she could say is, I like to look at crime scenes. But why didn't you look at the crime scene before you released him?
Why do you think it's a crime scene if you released him, right? I mean, like, if she said it's not credible and there's no crime scene because there was no crime, what crime scene is there to visit? That just doesn't compute.
And none of the supervisors got involved and supervised about what she was doing.
He killed 6 of the 11 women after that happened. And to be clear, she had physical injuries to her face and neck. There was blood and signs of a struggle in the snow in front of his house. The window of the front door of his house was broken exactly where she said it was. And he was a convicted sex offender. So there was more than enough evidence to arrest him and charge him and take this case to a grand jury just based on that alone. And if that had happened, 6 of these women would not have been killed.
She failed miserably to the point where she didn't even look up to find out that he had just been released after 15 years of a very violent assault against an individual. And he was required to be classified as a sexual offender where he has to report periodically. They didn't find that out until after the case was over.
We made numerous, and I mean numerous attempts to reach out to the Cleveland Police Department, prosecutor Lorraine Coyne, and Detective Georgia Hussein for this story. We tried them all in multiple ways, and those attempts, not successful. If anybody we just mentioned is listening to this, you have an open invite to come on the show. Just reach out.
Hussein closes the case against Anthony Sowell for the attempted rape, kidnapping, and robbery of Gladis Wade. And at the bottom of the incident report, the paperwork responding officers fill out about what they see and heard and learned. They typed the words, "Respectfully request Detective Bureau to follow up." Police protocol and procedure can be difficult. It can be a confusing and blurry mix of agencies, warrants, probable cause, witness statements, evidence, and what's required to make an arrest. To sort that out, we've tapped an expert in all of these things.
My name is Dr. Darren Porcher. I'm a former NYPD lieutenant. Throughout my 20-year tenure in the NYPD, I performed a multitude of different tasks. I was a detective, I was a police officer, I was a sergeant, I was a lieutenant that was responsible for supervising and managing detectives. I was an instructor in the NYPD's police academy.
So, as you can hear, Darren Porcher understands police work. He understands that a detective not viewing the photos taken at a scene, not viewing the crime scene until after the suspect is released, not informing a district attorney that that same suspect is also a registered sex offender, it's a bit problematic.
The failure to provide the district attorney with information as it relates to this being a sex offender is in a statement of we didn't think this was important, clearly reflects a lack of supervision because the supervisor should have been a part. This is a big deal. Like outside of, what people think, we watch television and they'll show that people are getting raped every day. It doesn't go that way. A rape is a really big deal. And so if someone was raped and it came to my attention, I'm going to be a part of that investigation as the lieutenant, myself as well as the sergeant, because this is not a regular thing. The same holds true with a homicide. So for the life of me, I can't understand how this information reached the district attorney without informing the district attorney that this person was a prior sex offender. It just totally blows my mind. And it goes back to this being a void in supervision. If that's not probable cause, I don't know what probable cause is.
It was a failure.
That's Teresa Stafford, and in 2009, she's the director of victim services at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center.
I think one of the things that could have happened is having a supervisor reviewing all of the cases that are closed and making sure there's an extra set of eyes on it. Hey, did you do A, B, C, or D before you close this case out? And having someone look at that case that's from the outside versus looking at it from the inside. If you follow the case and identify that this person said they were sexually assaulted by somebody who was a known sex offender, who just got out of prison for doing almost 2 decades of time in prison. I mean, I'd say he spent 15 years in prison. You have a person who's on the sex offender register list, somebody saying that they were sexually assaulted by them, and it was blown off. I don't understand how that happened. She did everything we want a survivor to do. We as a society get mad when people don't report right away. We want to say there's a reason why. Well, why did she report right away? She did. She reported immediately. She called law enforcement right when it happened, went to the hospital. She did everything we tell people we want them to do.
She gets a case, gets a file, is supposed to investigate, but doesn't report to the supervisor, this is what is on our plate. The supervisor would say, what's the criminal record? Now that's an important piece of evidence because it could be consistent with what he did to Gladis Wade. In other words, it would be more likely than not that he would have a motive, an intent to do this kind of thing. The supervisor never sat down. Well, what do you got here? What should we do? Now, before they, or maybe after they dismissed him, Gladis Wade called the sex crimes unit and said, what do you mean you let him out? And told the supervisors, and they didn't do anything about it. And for the next 6 months or so, he continued to go on his murder spree.
I think it's egregious as well as incompetence, but I think the thing that's being left out is there was a void in supervision. Me as a supervisor, as a lieutenant, I had detectives that investigated these cases. Then I had a sergeant that looked over what the detective did. And me as the lieutenant, before it left the house, I needed to look this stuff over to make sure that this was quintessential. And so it begs the question of where was the chain of command as it relates to this detective missing so many significant steps. From a rubber meets the road perspective, why the detective did not interact or interface with the police officers on the scene is just totally beyond me. How could something like that happen and not be caught by the supervisor is beyond me. The detective having the information that this was someone that was a prior sex offender and not present this information to the district attorney or the assistant district attorney also screams gross incompetence, or basically just was just a detective that just didn't care.
In 2010, the city of Cleveland is taken to court by the families of 6 victims: Diane Turner, Nancy Cobbs, Amelda Hunter, Janice Webb, Talicia Fortson, and LaShonda Long. They all go missing after Sowell's attack on Gladis Wade.
We narrowed it down to 2 classes of victims. One, those who were likely murdered before December 8th, 2008, when Gladis Wade was attacked. And then those who were missing and later found their bodies after December 8th, 2008. These were the victims that we represented because of the misconduct of the police department, particularly the sex crimes unit, because the inference is that had he not been released and he had been prosecuted, those victims would be alive. Ultimately, the case resolved against one party, and that was Georgia Hussein. Through the process of discovery, we found out that the sex crimes unit did not take seriously interactions of victims who were marginalized in the community. For example, most of the victims in this case had severe mental health issues, drug issues. They were oftentimes living on the streets. And so the priority of pursuing these kinds of victims who are not respected, who are not pillars of the community, that the priorities did not exist for them. They didn't see them as worthy of doing the kind of investigations that would be generally accepted protocols in policing.
For 8 years, the case makes its way through the Ohio court system, and in 2018, a settlement is finally reached.
$1 million. That's it. And the families of the 6 murder victims split it.
They were loved. They were loved by their families. They understood the social and mental situation with their loved ones. And that kind of took me aback that they would try to diminish the value of their lives to try to get the damage level down.
When we started this series about Anthony Sowell, we told you about missed opportunities, red flags, infuriating, egregious incompetence. And the story of Gladis Wade is a prime example of that. When Cleveland police respond to Sowell's attack on her and enters his home, Crystal Dozier, she hasn't been seen in a year and a half.
Tashana Culver, missing for 7 months. LaShonda Long, 4 months. And Tanya Carmichael, missing for weeks.
This is another one of those big what-ifs. What if better police work had been done here? What if authorities looked around just a little bit harder? What if minds had been just a little more open? Lives might have been saved.
This could be anybody's mother, sister, aunt, daughter. This is somebody's daughter. We know that for a fact. They might not be mothers. They might not be sisters. They might not be cousins. But they are somebody's daughter. There's a father and a mother. Some woman carried this bag, this girl right here, in this bag for 9 months. raised her. We stayed off of it. I purposely tried to get away from it because I wanted your rational, the real, and the imaginary to merge, and you think about it a little bit more here.
Oh, I don't know.
What if that was your daughter? I don't know her name. I don't want to know her name. You don't want to tell me? That's fine. We're not going to argue about that. But you got to think about the word daughter. What that means, a daughter. A father's daughter. That's his baby. He loved the shit out of her. Irregardless of what she was. You say they was a bad girl. Well, to him, that was his baby.
The discovery of 11 women inside and buried in the backyard of Anthony Sowell's house on Imperial Avenue also underlines something that people in the neighborhood have been saying for a long time. Women go missing here. It's not a new thing.
Well, they noticed it and they talked about it, and most of the people think that, there's a lot of conspiracies out here.
That's Don Laster again.
They think that one of the hospitals captured them and took their heart, liver, and lungs and sold them off to a rich person. That's kind of like what people think all the time when you're missing, especially if you're healthy.
Something's got to explain why these women are going missing. Did the neighborhood's behavior change? Like, did it get to the point where, like, people were looking out for each other? Or
No, everybody was going about their day. It didn't change anything. It was in a conversation sometimes. They looking for her. Well, one of the hospitals probably got her, so they say that all the time. Even now, when people are missing, they feel like they got them for their organs. And I think that is true in every city, that they don't write that off. But no, they wasn't looking out for each other or trying to find her. But some of the families was reporting it to the police. Some of the families was reporting that Anthony Sowell was the last one seen with their loved ones. But nothing got done about it.
Some of the most disheartening things I heard was that, when some of the families were going to get help from the system to look for their family members, to help put out police reports, to help get some media attention, that they were turned away. I think that's the most disheartening thing, that if people were actually paying attention to what these family members were stating when they went to seek help, then maybe, just maybe, Soul would have been identified a lot sooner. These were humans that just didn't get treated like humans, not from Soul or from the people that should have been responding effectively to their loss.
It's the kind of thing where the streets knew a lot before we did. The streets knew that there was a serial killer active in this neighborhood. I mean, Cleveland's a big town, but it's not that big. 11 people go missing in one specific neighborhood in a relatively compact period of time. People are going to notice. Their families are out looking for them. They were putting up missing persons posters that would mysteriously be taken down after a couple days. People knew something was wrong. And if people had that additional information that he was a sex offender, they may have been able to put two and two together more quickly than we did. And maybe someone would have gone to the police sooner. Maybe this investigation would have gotten rolling before we discovered 11 bodies at the house. Because by that time, it's too late, right? Like, the bad thing has already happened then.
The families never stopped looking for them. They made police reports. They were looking for their loved ones. They cared about them. They were going to police. They were going to some other social service agencies trying to get help. Just they didn't get the help they needed. But the families never stopped looking for these loved ones. They never stopped looking for their loved ones. They cared.
The dynamics of police work are incredibly difficult. Every city, every town has its own challenges. But what we're talking about here, is different.
This is also not an example of hindsight being 20/20. Anger is the right thing here. Gladis Wade wasn't taken seriously enough, and the Mount Pleasant neighborhood wasn't taken seriously enough. Full stop. When Detectives Smith and Griffin sit down in that interrogation room across from Anthony Sowell, the damage is already done.
Next time on Deviant.
So, Cleveland, your hometown? You never lived anywhere else?
Of course, I was in the military.
We're going to piece together Anthony Sowell's backstory. Where'd he come from? Who is he?
I hear you played on the golf team when you were at this
Damn, y'all know too much. Who the fuck told you all that, man?
You played
How'd
golf?
you, like, I just want to know how you find that out. That was so old.
Background is part of police work.
And asking how a veteran of the Marine Corps became a predator in plain sight.
I lived on Imperial. I had a house on Imperial, but I had moved out and rented it to somebody. That's how I knew Anthony Sowell.
Oh, you knew Anthony?
Yeah, I knew him. I knew his brother too.
Until next time, thanks for listening.
Don't forget to check out all the things that our Patreon has for you by visiting deviantpodcast.com. There are all sorts of different ways to experience the stories that we're telling there, as well as an opportunity to chat with me and Andrew and tell us what's on your mind. Also, make sure to check out our socials at deviant.podcast on Instagram and TikTok.
Deviant is written, produced, and executive produced by Clark Goldband, Dan Semitovich, and me, Andrew Iden. Editorial and production consultation comes from Jenny Ament, with original scoring from Shuvo Sir. Marketing, sales, and distribution support comes from our partners at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media.